Welcome to Theory of Paranormal. My name is Pax with my co-host Dalton. This is going to be season number 3, episode podcast number 7, and it is going to be on strange and mysterious paranormal activity and stories of the Canadian outback of Canada. So, we had a listener by the name of Eve wanting to know if we knew of any indigenous paranormal stories due to the fact that paranormal is prevalent all over Canada, and Canada is very expanse, and there is many austere environments with mountains and forests and waterways and streams that are very inhospitable that a lot of people don't live in Canada. And there are people that do live out in the middle of nowhere, a few hours away from other civilizations. So basically wanting to know what is going on with all these remote places. So with that being said, how are you doing this wonderful day, Dalton?
Oh, same stuff, man. Just trying to make a dollar.
There you go. Hopefully you're staying nice and warm in this very cold time of year.
Yeah, we run into some snow the other days, but it's not too bad tonight. But yeah, trying to stay in the cab of the truck and keep warm.
Yep. Well, we definitely want you to do that. Otherwise, your teeth would be chatty right now as you're talking to me and trying to do this nice little podcast we're doing. So,
just a few shout outs to some people, man. We got some new listeners out there. We got Lisa and Teresa over in Kingman, Arizona. There's some new listeners there. And my buddy Jericho that I met the other night, he's at the Truckomat in Indianapolis. Cool dude right there. While he was washing my truck, he actually put the pod in and started listening to the podcast while he was washing my truck. So want to welcome those people, especially Jericho there. Cool dude.
There you go. Welcome, new listeners that have joined Theory of Paranormal and returning listeners. As far as it goes with our podcast that me and Mr. Dalton do here, this is a worldwide podcast, and we do have listeners from all over the world that, when they have time, go ahead and check us out, and we definitely appreciate that. Now, this is something that we don't normally touch base on as far as places or countries that people listen to us in, but I was just going to say, looking at some of the stats, well, we got individuals in Ireland, the United Kingdom, Brazil, Australia, Germany, Moldova, Philippines, and Thailand, China, South Korea, and Sweden and Norway. Those are just some of the ones off the top of the list here. So if you're in any of those countries, we definitely appreciate you finding us, seeing how we're a podcast from a different country than where you're from, all the way in the United States. And if we didn't list your country, next time we check the list, we'll see if your country's listed there and give you a shout out. If you're a returning listener, we appreciate you listening to another amazing, fun, exciting, enthralling podcast with Pax and Dalton. And if you're a first-time listener, welcome. We definitely appreciate you tuning in. We try to get to a podcast once a month and put these out. I, myself, Pax, and Dalton, we do have normal lives, and we do keep pretty busy. So when the stars align and things slow down for a split second, we try to put out a cast, as Dalton calls them, and try to put out some good information. Sometimes we impart our personal experiences. Sometimes we give opinions. Sometimes we talk fact. Sometimes we even talked a little fiction just to mix it all up and make you think. A lot of times, we just put information out there and let you come to your own conclusions and let you do your own research. And also, when people do feel inclined, they will go to theoryparanormal.com and either communicate with us by sending us messages, submitting photos, videos, or audio for a professional review. Sometimes they'll even call the toll-free number if you live in the United States just to give us a quick phone call to say, hey, I really don't want to use technology. I just want to talk to you and, tell you what's going on and get you to answer my questions I have, or just give some commentary on a podcast and just leave a quick voicemail. And then also info@theoryparanormal.com. A lot of times people will send us information in on what they like about the podcast, maybe some commentary on something that we did in the past, or adding information to a story that we may have imparted. And a lot of times also just to say, hey, we heard what you had to say. We like it. We appreciate it. Keep up the great work. And me and Dalton always definitely enjoy and look forward to getting those type of emails. It's definitely nice. So
Yeah, and as the request came in through the Facebook Theory of Paranormal page, I see a lot of people coming to the page and viewing. Just go ahead and throw us a like there, if you don't mind. But we have been getting a lot of people passing through the Facebook page as well. We got some evidence. It's older evidence, but it's still some undisputable evidence that we have thrown up there.
Yep.
That you guys can look at, some photos, a few videos.
Yep. And just to put this out there, we are on 12 different podcasting locations / websites / applications. So if you go to theoryparanormal.com, scroll down to the bottom of the page, it will list all the different podcasts we are featured on. So now that we've said all of that,
for some reason, people are starting to ask us to do different states. I know Jericho asked us to do Indiana. That's probably going to be our next episode.
Indiana in the United States. Okay.
Yep. But now somebody's asking about, we did Asia last time. Now we're doing Canada. So
yeah, doing Canada this time.
They got a few stories that are kind of not floating torsos with fangs.
We know what's been on Dalton's mind since the last podcast we did.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around that, man. It's a hard thing to do. But anyway, what you want to start? You want me to start? Are you starting in Quebec or something on the French side there?
Yeah, I can get down with the Quebec side, the Quebecians, as they could be known to be called. So basically, there's indigenous groups throughout the Quebec area, such as the Innu, Monogamist, Naskakapi, and if I butcher that, I apologize. And the Algonquin peoples have long-standing beliefs in various preternatural beings. Now, what I mean by that is things like the Wendigos, which I talked about in the past, but just as a reminder, these are beings that are a gaunt cannibalistic monster described as a Algonquin and Innu traditions that haunt forests of eastern Quebec. Okay. Now, we did reference something equivalent to this also in the United States when we talked about different things. Now, there's also a reference to dwarves, two distinct types, elusive dwarves with magical abilities, and are a very big part of the traditional Innu beliefs. Now,
what was them tribes again that you mentioned?
The two tribes is the Innu, Montaganes, Naskapi, and the Algonquian.
Oh, okay.
Are the two different tribes. Now,
that's a mouthful.
Yeah, it's definitely a mouthful. Now, one of the other things that's really interesting is there is a urban legend / story about ghost babies. And the reference of it is, it refers to dozens of Atika McHugh and other indigenous indigenous, there we go, infants who disappeared after being hospitalized in the mid-20th century. So,
ghost babies.
Yeah, ghost babies. Now,
did they like if they were so like over in Sparta, if it's true, which I'm sure it is, but back when they were building Spartan troops, and if the baby came out not right, like it had to go through a process of inspection, and if it wasn't right, they just pretty much got rid of the child. Is that something they were doing there? Is that why we have ghost babies? I mean, what's the purpose? Why do we have ghost babies there?
So basically, the ghost babies refers to dozens of indigenous infants from those two nations who disappeared or died in hospitals from the 1950s and 1980s after being flown from remote communities for care, with families left without answers. And it actually prompted a law called the Baby Law to help uncover records and find closure. Now, what it came down to was they were brought from indigenous places to medical places for care, but they never returned home. And they never received explanations or anything. The families didn't. So it's pretty, if it happened to one or two babies, that would be a weird coincidence. But for it to happen to droves of babies from indigenous populations, that's pretty harsh.
Makes you wonder. I hate to even put it like that, but makes you wonder what. I mean, I kind of got in my head kind of what's going on there, but I'm not really going to say it.
Right. I mean, there's no way of knowing, unfortunately. And
well, it's weird that you're telling me that say this. So the medical people show up, they take these kids that are sick or whatever, and then they fly them to a hospital inland, I guess, because if you're, you're talking, they're out there in the middle of nowhere, so they fly them back to the hospital to never return.
Well, one of the big problems, to paint the picture is the indigenous tribes spoke different languages. There's a communication barrier also between where they were going and what was going on versus the tribes. So now, besides that, if you were to look at Quebec, which is a region of Canada, a pretty big region. A lot of stuff goes on there.
Pretty much the east side of Canada.
Yeah, pretty much. It's very
all the French.
Well, everybody's French, but that's the majority French speaking of Canada is the eastern side, from what I understand. And I'm probably get emails or messages telling me I'm wrong. That's fine.
No, you're right. Actually, Quebec refuses to. Montreal, I used to go to Montreal all the time, and everything is in French.
Mm-hmm.
The signs, everybody will speak French. They know how to speak English. Luckily, delivering stuff up there, I was able to find a few nice people that actually spoke English to help me get to where I was going. But their part of Canada, that part of Canada, they strictly are French. They speak French. All their stuff is written in French. That's what I call the French side of Canada. That's the real French side of Canada, not a French American type. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So some of the notable things about Quebec is it is rich in a lot of paranormal tales. They got a story about the Lady in White, a modern Mornsey Falls, who's a bride who leapt to her death, the tormented spirit of Mary Gallagher, a decapitated woman who supposedly is haunting Griffintown. And then there's a chilling poltergeist case in Clarendon involving a devilish voice and flying objects from the 1880s that goes all the way back then. Now, there's also the Spectral Girl at Auberge Saint Gabriel in Montreal. And then there's a place that's haunted at the historic Grey Nuns Mother House, which actually has a deep-rooted history linked to past tragedies and epidemics. So that place is, pretty mirrored in things that happened. Like, for instance, the lady in white, heartbroken bride, she drowned herself after her love died in battle, and her ghost is seen leaping from the falls. The Mary Gallagher in Griffintown is the ghost of a murdered woman allegedly decapitated in 1879 and is said to search for her head in this old Montreal neighborhood, with sightings reported every 7 years.
That's pretty precise.
It is. The Clarendon poltergeist, a notorious 1889 case in the rural Quebec where stones were thrown, fire started, and a voice claiming to be the devil emerged from a farmhouse. Now, the ghost girl of Alberg of La Sainte Gabrielle in Old Montreal is the spirit of a young girl lost in a fire, said to haunt the inn with phantom piano music and phone calls from the past. In the Grey Nun's mother house, which is now part of Concordia University, this building has reported hauntings from epidemic victims and orphans who perished in 1918's fire. Now, something else that I found interesting is there's a place called Le Deux Fantômes, or Phantom Island, which is a small island near the Seplies, named for a shipwrecked schooner, the Phantom. And in 1862, that's when it met its demise.
Well, Canada's pretty rich with dealing with pirates and stuff too.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Yeah. No, I believe that wholeheartedly. I mean, it's so steep with the paranormal. Now, there's a place called Magog, Quebec. Now, it's known their main focal point for the paranormal for the Mepri, a lake monster similar to Nessie or the Loch Ness Monster from England, which has hundreds of sightings and even an artistic depiction on a Canadian quarter. But the region also features general spooky tales about the mysterious disappearance and sightings of the legendary Wendigo, which I brought up. And
the Wendigos.
Yeah, I mean,
didn't we talk about Wendigos in the Appalachian chapter?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I was referencing that about 15 minutes ago when I said we talked about Wendigos in a previous podcast.
So they got Wendigos in Quebec.
Yeah, they got their own versions.
You know the different names of the versions, or they tell you?
No, they just refer to it as Wendigo. Sometimes cryptid names or different things are universal. You know, it's interesting, just because the fact you can go to any place in Canada and you're going to find something. Like, for instance, there's a place that's a little ways away from Magog, Canada, a town called Sherbrooke, which is actually pretty big. And as far as it goes, there's a lot of stuff going on there. There's a place called Granada Theater. And for anybody that ever has been to Sherbrooke, you might have heard of it. And to make a long story short, there was a ghost there by the name of George. He's been haunting the famous theater since his death in 1940, when he was a spectator and the concierge at the time. His body was reportedly found in seat P13 on the balcony after a performance. When it was renovated back in 2019, all the seats were replaced, but only P13, George's seat, remained untouched. And what they say,
to touch it?
No, what they say is nothing major happens at the theater. Just some shadows every now and then, and that's it. Maybe a door closing on their own, some unexplained noises, you know. But what's even more interesting is there is another location. There used to be a house of the former residence of a senator in Sherbrooke. And there was a lot of paranormal activity reported there. And the house, because it was a senator, had a lot of administration offices. And it spooked everybody out. all the employees were seeing things that didn't make sense, unstrange occurrences, footsteps, flower pots falling, doors slamming. And it was just like, no. So everybody just was like, we're done. We're out of here. Now, not to outdo it, but there's a former prison called the Winter Prison, which welcomed its first prisoner in 1869. And basically, this place has kept the interest of a lot of local people that live in Sherbrooke, because people aren't sure how or why the place is haunted, but things happen. And there used to be a humidity problem with water. So basically, the place kind of fell in disarray big time. And a lot of big people back in the day perished there. They actually had 6 hangings. And, that's just, I can't even talk about that. I don't even want to even think about what that would be like. But not to outdo it, but then there's also Witch Bay. And in the 18th century, there was an individual. And basically, there was this individual that she represented herself to where if you saw her, you think or thought she was a witch. Unfortunately, she got hanged. And ever since then, random women have been drawn to Fitch Bay. And one particular woman was drawn there, and she moved into this individual's house that got killed in the 1800s.
Well, there is all over Canada. There is witches, tales of witches.
Yep. Well, this
like
this
that,
happened. This particularly happened after the Salem witch trials. But what's crazy about this particular story is this one woman was drawn to Fitch Bay. She ended up moving into the house of the one woman from the 1800s that got killed, and was greeted by the ghost of her former tenant, and that she too practiced magic.
Well, she was probably a witch too.
I mean, it's just one of those things. It's every place. It may look common. You may be on the road. You might drive by and be like, oh, okay, that's a nice little quaint place. They got some nice shops. They got a good place to eat. A place you can go in and get some knickknacks and things of that nature and not think twice. And then come to find out it's like super, super haunted.
No, we got that over here, man. You go to St. Augustine, and
St.
a lot of
Augustine.
people don't realize
St. Augustine's located where?
In Florida.
There you go.
But you can go in there, and a lot of people wander through in and out them little tiny stores and stuff, and don't realize that place is really haunted.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing. But Quebec now, it was founded in 1608 and first settled in 1535.
There you go.
And has garnered an understandable reputation of being haunted. They understand it, I guess. But there's a lot of places that you're talking about, and then there's a province that sits, Quebec's a province that sits on the shores of the famous St. Lawrence River. It's one of the oldest European settlements, and it actually goes down. It's Canada's second most populated province, and they settled down into North America somewhat back then, actually. But have you ever heard of the La Berge Saint Gabriel?
Yeah, I just mentioned the Saint Gabriel earlier.
I thought you did, but I might have missed the way you pronounced it. But it was built in 1688.
Oh, geez.
By a French soldier, and basically, it was actually the first. They call it a berge. I guess that means bar, basically. on this continent to receive a liquor license.
So does that mean does
1754.
that mean there are a lot of spirits in there?
There's spirits. They're drinking spirits to see spirits.
For anybody that
So,
doesn't know, the English word spirits can also mean alcohol or liquor. So that's why I made that very poorly, probably very good tasting joke.
well, here's an interesting thing. I didn't know they had a liquor license in 1754.
Hmm.
That's something new. So basically, in the lantern lit walls of the historic inn, they had many tales. The inn is rumored to be haunted by the ghost of a little girl who died in a fire in the 19th century.
That's no good.
Customers of the St. Gabriel that usually they're currently in the restaurant reported the feels of cold chills and inside the narrow stone wall venue, even during the dead of summer. So here's the thing: you got to look at that. You're in a stone wall area. There's going to be some cold spots, cold chills. So it's for me. This is where I come in and say it's kind of hard to tell what's paranormal, even though you're in the dead of summer. I'd have to see, like, they're not saying like how hot it gets in that place.
Yep.
If it actually gets hot, because the stone itself will cool the place off because you got stone walls. So with that, I would say I'd be skeptical about that. Not that the kid passed, the little girl who died in a fire in the 19th century, but people reportedly feel cold chills inside the narrow stone walled venue. You just said it, narrow stone wall. So if you walking down a narrow stone wall, it's going to throw out cold spots from the stone.
Yeah.
So then you had the Cathedral of the Holy Trinity, which was built in 1804. This legend holds it was built over the grave of a baby whose mother now haunts the cathedral. Churchgoers claim to have heard the organ play by itself after church hours. Now, they say that many guests allegedly report a lady floating on the balcony. I think you was talking about something like that. But the organists that play there, they've heard a female cry whenever they practice, apparently because the balcony's ghost mourns the death of her child. But if a toy is placed on the organ, the organist apparently practiced in peace, no screams and no chills. I guess they put a toy out for the child.
That would be called a trigger object in the paranormal world, which is anything that produces a particular result you are trying to get done, whether it's initiating contact or appeasing a spirit or energy or the other side to give a desired result, which could be that.
Right. So you're basically, with the toy, you're pleasing the mother and the child, I guess. The child but it's not unique. I don't want to use the word unique, but it's kind of one of those things that you built. I mean, actually, how would they know that they built this on top of this baby's grave, I guess?
What, the other side?
Well, the people that built the church. It was built over the grave of a baby whose mother haunts the place. So, I guess it was one of those things where there was no marker of the grave and they just built a church there. So I would say that the mother's buried there as well. If the baby's buried there, I would say she's buried under that church as well, and that's why she haunts it. I can't see the church being buried on the baby's grave and then all of a sudden the mother appears just to haunt the place. There's no explanation why she's actually haunting. Is she mad because they built a church on the grave, or?
I would just say because that right there in itself. I mean, come on. That's the equivalent of taking somebody's spot, literally. So I could understand why that incited something bad like that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They're just talking. It's the baby. So they built the church. Who found out they built the church on the baby's grave? How did that? It's very vague about how that come about. You know what I'm saying? You either knew there was a baby buried there and you just built a church on top of it, or how'd you build the church and then find out all of a sudden there's a baby buried there and the mother's haunting the place?
Yeah.
You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm thinking maybe maybe what they're not saying is the mother's buried there too, and then that's why the mother haunts the place. And I'm pretty sure the baby probably haunts the place.
Yeah.
So they found out after they built the church that, oh, there was people buried here. There's probably more than just her and that baby, I would think. But anyway, it's very vague, but it's kind of interesting. But you also have, I don't know if you mentioned the Dugan House in Montreal. The Dugan House is a creepy old Gothic mansion hidden behind the trees on Mount Royal. The shadowy estate is currently owned by McGill University's Education Department. It's one of the oldest buildings on campus, built in 1861. Using gray hand-cut limestone that was recycled from Simon McTavish's old estate, the Dugan House is said to be the home of the ghost of the stairs. Students and faculty have reported basically tripping up the stairs on the step for decades. A student on her way to her professor's office claims to have witnessed a 19th century girl wearing a petticoat cackling loudly on top of the staircase banisters.
Cackling.
Laughing.
For effect.
Yes, laughing. Then you have this one kind of interests me. I'd like to research this one a little more in a future day, but Doria Institute in Franklin. It is an abandoned former mental institution in the remote small town of Franklin, an hour southwest of Montreal. So if y'all are up by Montreal, you have an abandoned mental institution down there.
No, thank you.
After traveling through a quiet, forested road to get there, the Doria, D-O-R-E-A, grounds are split between a large building and a smaller housing unit, both of which apparently are haunted by the mental institution's former patients. The larger building consists of decrepit gymnasium, rotten classrooms, and a padded cell room. Don't know why you'd have the gymnasium classroom. I guess if they get out of hand, they got a padded cell room right there to go to.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's jail, so they're going to require activities and things, education, all that. So,
right. And the smaller building consists of bedrooms, a room with a dentist chair, and an outdoor merry-go-round. So visitors, of course, I already know where we're going with that they claim the merry-go-round spins by itself. And film documentarians say their footage often comes back blurry, soundless, and unusable. A filmmaker once claimed that while using thermal vision, the footage showed 4 radiated characters despite only being on location with one other crew member.
That's interesting.
That's why I like the thermal vision, the thermal cameras and stuff, because they pick up a lot of stuff that you can't get on other things. And then they got the Griffin Town in Montreal. Basically, through the years, it's witnessed dying Irish refugees during the famine of 1847. But it's ghost Mary Gallagher, the headless prostitute that haunts the Griffintown borough. Did you mention that on that?
Yes.
One? Yes. Okay, so that's the Griffintown.
So here's something for you real quick while we're talking about all this. There was a research poll done, and it was a pretty simple, straightforward poll, but it pertained on the paranormal and what Canadians thought of the paranormal. If they thought it was real, if they thought it was fake, if they thought it was, And out of the poll that they took, 44% believes in the paranormal, 31% is neutral, not yes, not no, and 24% doesn't believe in the paranormal. So that's actually pretty interesting. And when this study was done, the paranormal was comprised of multiple things, from ghostly hauntings, alien invasions, alien visitations. If there was an invasion, we would know. Sea creatures, giant wolves, Wendigos, Sasquatches, Bigfoot, psychics, telekinesis, astrology, and Ogopogo. And those were the benchmarks that were used in this study slash survey to see if people generally had thought process to it. And I thought that was pretty interesting.
Well, they have the Canadian team up there. That's the Canadian team that created the Ghost, the Conjuring Philip that I talked about episodes ago.
Oh, there you go.
That was the Canadian Paranormal Society team that actually created a ghost. They told a story, created a fiction character, and then did a séance, and it actually was answering the questions correctly as though they created it. Now, when you're doing a séance or you're messing with a Ouija board or whatever, you never know what's coming through that stuff anyway. So, but yeah, so the Canadians, I mean, the one story I told, I think it was in the first or beginning of second season, but it was about Conjuring Philip. It's an actual true case of Canadian paranormal teams, getting together and actually creating a ghost that had a story and a life.
Hmm.
Did you mention the Fairmont
Yes, I
Queen
did.
Elizabeth Hotel? Okay, but you didn't talk about, which is interesting, that's the site of John and Yoko's bed is in that place. So John Lennon and Yoko, his wife,
Hmm.
his bed is in there, and they say that the hotel has been revamped throughout the years, but hasn't been able to shake one spirit in particular, which is your woman dressed in white that wanders around the corridors at night. And they claim that she hums songs late into the night. Now, it's kind of, I'm wondering, I wouldn't know if that would be Yoko because she passed away not too long ago, right? Within 5 or 10 years ago.
I wouldn't know offhand.
Yeah. But it's weird that you mentioned that hotel and then I kind of looked it up to see something and first thing they say is that's John and Yoko's it's the site of John and Yoko's bed in
Hmm.
like like a bed and breakfast, I guess, or
Yeah,
yeah.
very
So that's
interesting.
interesting. That's interesting.
Very
So
interesting.
you got anything more you want to talk about in Quebec?
Nope, that pretty much rounds it up for what I had to touch base on the Canadian paranormal that I wanted to put out there. As the listeners can see or hear, shall I say, the stories from Canada are similar but different to other things that we've discussed from other states in the United States or different countries around the world. And that's just what I love about seeing what's going on with different places and different things and hearing all these, stories that may or may not be relatively known to hear the ins and outs of everything.
Well, we'll shift over to Nova Scotia for a minute if you want.
Sure. What you got?
So Nova Scotia, again, like Quebec, is rich in ghost stories and haunted locations, featuring tales of ghost ships, historic sites, and eerie encounters that reflect its dark and fascinating history. So just to float through just a couple here on this one section, you have the ghost ship of Northumberland Strait. So one of the most famous legends is that a mysterious burning ship seen sailing between Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island. This ghostly vessel, described as a three-mast schooner engulfed in flames, has been reported by sailors and locals for centuries, yet no evidence of its existence has ever been found.
Hmm.
So it's kind of weird that these people are seeing this schooner, three-masted schooner, engulfed in flames, but no, there's no evidence of it.
That is pretty
I wonder if
strange.
anybody. Well, I wonder if anybody's actually gone because you have the people like in the U.S. that are treasure hunters or whatnot, and they go and they follow. Let's say they find a Spanish galleon off the coast of Florida. Well, then they go do research about it, and this is when I do other countries like this. I'm like, come on, folks, like you're spitting out these stories. Give me some more. Give me what'd you do for research? There's got to be some kind of evidence of some kind of three-masted schooner that was sailing between Scotia and Edward Island that caught fire or something. There's got to be a record of it somewhere. But to sit here and just say, yet no evidence of its existence has ever been found. Maybe they have gone to try to look for evidence and they just can't find nothing. But you got the Citadel Hall. This historic site in Halifax is said to be home to several spirits, including a little girl who follows tour groups. So if you're going to take a tour of the Citadel Hall, be prepared for a little girl to follow you. Visitors often report feeling a chill and experiencing strange occurrences while exploring the grounds. Now, this whole town of Broughton is just outside of Sydney. It's an abandoned town that has been haunted since it was deserted in 1916. That's a long time. 1916, this town was abandoned. They say that ghost hunters often visit hoping to encounter the spirits of those who once lived there. They don't really say, again, why this town was deserted, or, maybe the economy was bad. I got no answer for that.
Yeah, that is pretty strange.
It does say that even a ghostly experience, even in the daytime, is very great for you to, if you go to this town of Broughton, that you'll have pretty good experiences even during the daytime. And now we've said that several times, that some investigations that we do have just as much experience in the daytime as we do at night. There's no, it's the film and the get up that, oh, it's 3 a.m. in the morning, blah, blah, blah. It's the witching hour. I've never found anything like that. Have you, to be
No.
true?
From my own personal experience, it's a mixed bag. I've investigated places for leisure and for fun, and it's been dead as a doorknob. Nothing, no activity. And then I've been to other places where I think nothing's going to happen, and yeah, I get tons of activity. Day or nighttime, it doesn't make a difference. I think it just depends on what's going on. Sometimes I've done private investigations to where everything that has been conveyed to me has been very mundane and relaxed and laid back, and then I get there and it's a total crap show and all sorts of stuff's happening. So it's
Yeah, and it. Go ahead.
it's just that's the crazy thing about the paranormal is you don't get to choose the level of activity or involvement. It chooses you, and you just go along for the ride. So
Right, because sometimes we can show up there and we'll have weird feelings like before we get there. And then we get there and there's not. Now, we have done some where there's not much visual activity or sense activity. Like you're not really, and you feel like you're not really getting anything. And then you go back and redo all the evidence. You sit there and you go through the hours of the video cameras and stuff, and you're thinking, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, oh, what was that? Or what was this? Or what was that sound on the EVP? Or what's this? You might not personally have seen or heard anything and felt like, man, there ain't much going on here. But you go back and review the evidence and there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes. And then there's times where we show up and we don't really feel much. We just feel like it's nothing going to happen and it explodes. Boom. It's like a bombshell of stuff paranormal going off in that house or that building or wherever we're at.
Yep.
But you have
that's how it is.
The Caledonia Mills. It holds a mysterious history that dates back to 1899. The McDonald family consisted of Alexander, Mary, and their foster daughter, Mary Ellen, who was 16, and they had some fires begin in that area. 30 fires sprang out of nowhere in the end. And even the increased vigilance, with increased vigilance, they never caught the arsonist. Now, suspicion was placed on Mary Ellen, basically because she was a teenager, and teenagers do weird stuff. And then you had this, which is kind of unique. They had a supernatural suspicion, as people thought she might have been possessed by a poltergeist and started the fires, basically. The McDonald's eventually moved away, but visitors through the decades have reported that the fire they call it the fire spook, seems to be around still. According to legend, You shouldn't take anything from the property with you. It might cause fires in your own home. That's good to know.
Good to know.
So if you're going to the Caledonia or Caledonia Mills, don't take anything. The other thing that I was wanting to talk about, you had a lady in white.
Yes.
Nova Scotia has a lady in gray, or they call her the Gray Lady. She is found in the Halifax Citadel and the Gray Lady of Stony Beach are two of the. So you have the Gray Lady of the Halifax Citadel. You actually have two of them, and the Gray Lady of Stony Beach are two of the most famous ghost stories in Nova Scotia. So the Gray Lady of the Citadel is believed to be the spirit of Cassie Allen, who waited in vain for her fiance, a soldier from the Citadel, who later took his own life. The Gray Lady is said to be searching for her lost love and is often seen in the Cavalier building of the Citadel. Why does it seem like these foreign countries all have these? I'm waiting for my husband or fiance, and now I'm searching for him in the afterlife, kind of thing.
There's a lot of stories like that. A lot of things. So, I mean, there's parallels and contrasts. Yep.
I guess.
Yep.
Then you have the Gray Lady of Stony Beach. On the other hand, is known to locals since the 1800s and is often seen gliding along the beach with a black veil over her face. She is said to be the ghost of a fisherman who was killed by his wife after he returned from a long voyage. Now, I read exactly what that is. So this woman is gliding with a black veil. She is said to be the ghost of a fisherman who was killed by his wife after he returned from a long voyage. So the Gray Lady of Stony Beach is also a subject of ghost tours and is known for her striking appearance and haunting presence. I don't know how she has a striking appearance being a ghost, but okay. So both stories are part of a rich tapestry of Nova Scotia folklore. Folklore, you see, I said it right, and continue to captive the imagination of visitors. Now, the thing about Nova Scotia, you talked about dwarves.
Yep.
Well, Nova Scotia has what they call the little people. Their belief is that they're fairies and they're deeply rooted in the regions of cultural heritage. The Mi'kmaq people, for instance, have a rich history of storytelling that includes tales of the little people, often interpreted as fairies or gnomes. I don't know. I guess gnomes can be fairies.
Don't think so. That's why you got one
I,
called a fairy, one called a gnome, two different type of things, but maybe for reference. Sure.
yeah, they do say fairies or gnomes, but I'm just saying. I mean,
Mhm.
what kind of being would a gnome be? I guess a little. They're like little magical creatures, I guess, but
Yep.
I don't know. I wind up kicking them out of the way when I'm mowing the grass. But these these stories reflect the Mi'kmaq's connection to the land and its natural elements, with little people believed to have special place in their mythology. So the concept of the little people is also present in the folklore of their First Nations, basically across Canada, with tales that often feature tiny, elusive beings endowed with basically, they say pre it says predator, not predator, but natural powers. Let's just go there. And these stories are part of a broader tradition of indigenous mythology that includes your dwarfs, right? Elves and goblins, all of which share similarities with the little people found in Nova Scotia.
Hmm. That's something that you don't hear that much ever in the paranormal is goblins.
No, that's why I mentioned that because they say dwarves, elves, and goblins. So the belief in the fairies and the little people in Nova Scotia is not just a cultural curiosity, but a way of connecting with the natural world, which we mentioned in the spirit of the land. It was a reminder that the enduring legacy of indigenous culture and the importance of preserving the stories for future generations on that. Now they talk about even like basically putting little doors in the bottom of the trees. Like these people actually go out there and make these little doors. And it basically is the doorway from their land to ours. Now that's their the belief in the fairies though. We talked about I talked about that guy a while back on an episode that went looking. He was out in the middle of like some kind of desert, and then he stumbled across like a group of trees, and it was weird because it's like the only group of trees that was out there. But you could hear these noises, and he was saying that those are fairies in those trees, like they live in those little trees. It's just like one little group of trees out in the middle of a desert. It was weird,
Hmm.
and there was a bunch of little tiny voices and noises coming from those trees. He wouldn't get close, but he like zoomed in on it. But the belief in fairies and a worldwide phenomenon, enchanting stories of green elves, pixies, that's another type, trolls, and what they call sprites abound in the countries like Ireland and Germany. We don't hear many stories of Native American fairies or different types of fairies here in this country, but fairies are everywhere because fairies are nature spirits, and they're typically seen in undisturbed natural places. Now, our Native Americans tell stories of encounters with the little people, how they help children or taught shamans. Now, there's an interesting thing that they're saying that these fairies taught shamans, and the fairies in our country, in America, can be territorial depending on the type. So, little interesting thing on fairies there, but the fairies in Canada, it's kind of a thing. Have you ever heard of a thing called the gluescape?
Nope.
So the gluescape in Nova Scotia is basically the First Nation, is a Canadian Mi'kmaq Aboriginal community. So like Aborigines from like Australia, but they got Aborigines in Canada. So it's basically a legendary figure of the Wabanaki peoples, known as the Mi'kmaq, Abenaki, and other indigenous groups in Canada. He is often depicted as a creator or a god who shapes landscapes and has magical powers.
Hmm.
So it's portrayed as a kind and benevolent figure who fights against evil, contrasting with his evil twin brother, Malsumus. Now, this is, I don't like getting into the religion section of this, but it's odd that this pops up. So the stories are rich with cultural values and traditions, and they have been passed down through generations, reflecting or like the oral traditions of the Wabanaki. Okay, so let's take it back to this guy is a creator or a god who shapes landscapes and has the magical powers to do such, right? Who fights evil, contrasting with his evil twin brother, Malsumus. Now, I'm going to say this one thing because then I'm going to go on to something else because I'm not going to dive into the book of Enoch. So if you ever read the book of Enoch and read those tales, in that book, which I've mentioned before about the giants roaming the earth and blah, 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 with the battle between the giants and the so-called basically angels, the book of Enoch says that basically God and Lucifer were brothers. If you can imagine that, right? So it says that they were basically brothers. Like he created us to be test subjects he created this planet for us to be created to be test subjects. And then what we know as Lucifer, he has another name, that these two were actually brothers. And he came and said, hey, you were created because, they say, we're created after his image, right? You with me?
Yep.
So what Lucifer or what this other, I forget his name, but anyway, he come down, he did give us an apple, but he said, your energy and your creation is basically like us angels. You have the same powers. So hence, like for instance, psychics, mediums, people that can maybe see into the future a little bit. I don't know how. I think that's very rare, but I think there's a few out there that probably can. Our sensitivity, like we talk about, all people have the sensitivity to sense the paranormal, and how I hear them, or like you have, like your healing thing that you grab their hands and you can calm them down and soak up their their bad energy, and you feed them with good so they feel better. You know what I'm saying? That that type of stuff. So it just kind of makes you wonder, like, okay, so they're talking about this guy having an evil brother, a twin brother, and then the Book of Enoch talks about, basically in layman's terms, that God and Lucifer were brothers. Like Lucifer wasn't just an angel back, you know, kicked out of heaven, that these two were actually brothers. And he just went against his brother by giving us more of a freedom to be ourselves and think for ourselves. So that's why they, kind of made him like the evil guy. You know what I'm saying? But it's very weird that Canada, the Wabanaki people, have this same similar story as the Book of Enoch's. It's just something that kind of we reached out and grabbed me. If you can understand that, I'm sure you do.
No, I definitely.
So,
Go ahead.
oh no, go ahead. Well, you definitely what?
No, I was gonna say I definitely see what you're saying there. I mean, obviously, Canada has a lot of things going on with it. A lot of stories, a lot of urban legends, a lot of things.
Well, you had a group of indigenous people. You mentioned the Wabanaki Confederacy, I guess, is a group. It's basically 5 principal Native American tribes in the Northeast United States and Eastern Canada, known for their rich cultural heritage and historical significance. So it's called the Wabanaki Confederacy, and it consists of the following tribes, and I'm probably going to butcher some of these, but it's the Abenaki. They're primarily located in Vermont and New Hampshire. The Mi'kmaq, found in maritime provinces of Canada and parts of Maine. Now, this one here, the whatever this is, but they got in parentheses Malecite. They inhabit the areas along the St. Johns River in New Brunswick and Maine. Then you have this Passamaquoddy. They're located in eastern Maine, particularly around the Passamaquoddy Bay area. And then you have the Penobs, Penobscot. Penobscot. They reside primarily on the Penobscot River in Maine. So when I told you earlier that a lot of these tribes actually like formed in Canada, but kind of spread down, probably didn't know that they got down into the U.S. in the Maine area, in the Vermont up there by the border. They didn't know, but they set residency in those areas. Now this was a group that was formed as a political alliance among these tribes to strengthen their collective power against basically European colonization. But I'm not going to get into the political part of it, but they are pretty much those indigenous from the Nova Scotia area. So they spread out pretty good for a while. And then last but not least, you have the pirate tales in Nova Scotia, George Island. Once a pirate prison, this island is now a National Historic Site where pirates were caught and punished. Legend has it that the island is haunted by the spirits of these infamous figures. You have Point Pleasant Park, located near Black Rock Beach. If any of y'all Canadians know where Black Rock Beach is, it's where Edward Jordan was tried and executed for piracy. The park also features the oldest tower in it's North America. So I'm wondering if Point Pleasant Park is right on the border there. Edward Jordan, he was a notorious pirate. Again, executed in Halifax for his role in piracy. His gibbet is still a reminder of the law's harshness against pirates. These stories and tales not only highlight the historical significance in the piracy of Nova Scotia, but also the region's rich maritime heritage. They say that visitors that go to Nova Scotia can explore these sites and learn about the stories that have shaped the island's history. And then you got Oak Island and Halls Harbor, all pretty much. Oak Island was the fabled money pit of Oak Island, which they have a show called Oak Island. Have you ever seen that?
Yep. I've watched it many
And
times.
they're looking for the treasure of Oak Island, right? That's what
Yep.
they're doing.
Correct.
So this island, again, is known for its mysterious treasure and the ongoing effort to uncover its secrets. It's basically subject of over 200 years of treasure hunting.
I can see that.
I've watched some of that Oak Island episodes where they actually went to that one island that was full of snakes. You see that one? It was just an island covered with snakes,
Oh, yeah.
poisonous snakes. And they had to go on that island and try to find clues of this treasure. So they brought not only the camera crews, but they brought like people with them that had, the antidote in case they got bit. But the camera guy, every time he turned around, it's like, oh, there's a couple snakes there. There's a couple. This island was just covered with snakes because they can't go nowhere. They don't swim. I guess they don't swim. Most like rattlesnakes swim. Other snakes swim, but I
Moccasins
guess
swim.
these just definitely moccasins, and they chase you too.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, just interesting stuff about Canada.
Yeah.
A lot of folklores, a lot of legends. They have superstitions and folk beliefs. The Gaels of Nova Scotia hold various superstitions, such as the belief in second sight, where individuals claim to have the ability to foresee future events, often of tragic nature. I just talked about that. Your sense, if you can open the sense and you have the ability to do such. They even have fairy love. We talked about fairies. That's where the tradition of creating fairy doors has gained popularity, where small doors are placed at the base of trees believed to be portals to the fairy realm.
Interesting.
So, very interesting stuff. I mean, when you go from Quebec to Nova Scotia, and probably you can get over even going west, I'm sure there's a lot more stuff that we can dig up.
Oh, I believe it without a doubt. We discussed a lot of things on this particular podcast of the Canadian paranormal and touch base on a lot of different towns and urban legends and stories and things of the past. As far as it goes for this podcast of Theory of Paranormal, episode seven of season 3, that's going to be wrapping this episode up. If you
we'd like to thank everybody again for listening, for sure. Jericho, your episode's next, brother. Don't worry about it. We're going to get you.
Yep, and definitely appreciate your question, Eve, in reference to Canada and the indigenous areas of Canada and what some of the stories were. And as far as it goes, as we always say, if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, want to reach out to Theory of Paranormal, let us review some audio, video, or photography for a professional review, you can email it to info@theoryparanormal.com, or you can go to theoryparanormal.com and message us there and send us things also. And that will also show where our podcasts are being featured. And it'll have a little information about me and Dalton there if you want to see what we look like, learn a little about us, learn a little bit about Theory of Paranormal, what our goal is, what we're trying to do and achieve. There's some words there that you can read.
Where's Eve from?
From my understanding, Canada. So,
okay.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Eve. I hope we kind of touch base on some things that you didn't know and maybe some things you did.
Yep. As it goes, if you have anything that you want to ask or a commentary, please feel free to contact us, let us know, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. So that looks like that about wraps it up there, Dalton, for the episode on the Canadian paranormal and indigenous areas of Canada.
Always goes by when you're having fun.
Always, without a doubt. So as we always say here in Theory of Paranormal, we appreciate everybody listening, and don't be afraid to ask questions.